Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer and welcome to the breaking news. Today's breaking news is that Ukrainian forces have stricken Russian forces massively inside of the Russian Federation and inside of Ukraine today, as they've been greatly heightening the amount of deep strike attacks that Ukrainian armed forces have been conducting in hopes to knock out Russian strategic infrastructure that will make the Russian tactical situation on the front line untenable. This brings us directly into the city of Berdyansk, a city that has been controlled by the Russian Federation since the very earliest days of the war, or really the invasion of 2022. We were able to hear that there were reports of explosions that came from the city, and not that long after, just minutes later, pictures emerged of a massive fire that was now brewing on one of the larger buildings within the southeastern area of the city, showing that the fire is so large and is continuing to burn at such a pace that it is most likely completely burned down the building that the fire is at, and we were also able to find where exactly this building is. When we go down into the city of Berdyansk and into the southeastern area, we can actually see that this is the Dormash plant, a factory that is being used by the Russian Federation to repair abandoned tanks and armored personnel carriers over the course of the war. This is a highly advantageous position for this factory to have been in, as it's connected to the larger rail network that travels through southern Ukraine. You can actually see the Berdyansk railway station here, and we can also see a rail yard directly alongside and a fairly sizable motor pool looking area where these vehicles could be stationed until they can get moved into the plant itself and then repaired inside of the building. Now that this factory has been knocked out, this means that the Russians have a much smaller amount of repair bases to work off of throughout Ukraine, and especially large ones that would be able to effect a larger and more serious repairs to some of the more heavily damaged vehicles. This is once again giving us an idea that the Russian Federation will be having a bit of an issue going on into the future, as it seems as though things will not be going well, at least on the logistical end, in this matter. Not only that, but major attacks, unbelievable attacks in scope, have happened once again in the area of Krasnodar and also within the area of Smolensk as well. Moving on down to the Krasnodar area, we were able to see that a refinery was blown up in the area of Nefikachka, if we can pronounce that correctly. Here's the clip of the refinery explosion occurring, and we were able to see the subsequent flames and also the sound of air raid sirens right here. We hear the explosion go off, and we can see some kind of a orange glare off in the distance. We don't really know if that's a refinery explosion, but we can hear multiple impacts hitting this refinery and knocking it on out. That's the end of that clip, but once again give us another good picture that things are starting to go quite south once again within the area of Krasnodar. It appears that more refineries are getting hit and being knocked out, and these refineries once again are ensuring that the Russian military can try and keep up at least a usable supply or a usable strategic reserve of fuels to keep the war effort running. At the exact same time in the Smolensk region, we were also able to hear that another fire broke out, and we also heard that this may be some sort of an oil refinery or oil silo that was stricken and caught on fire just an hour ago. We can see this Russian camera person filming the fire as it emits a very thick black smoke, letting us know that it is most likely some kind of a fuel-based product or an oil-based product. And that's the end of that clip as well. All of these attacks are showing that the Ukrainians are really starting to try and knock out everything they can on the Russian strategic end, whether it be repair bases inside of Ukraine, whether it be oil refineries inside the Russian Federation, or fuel storage sites. They are continuously pounding these positions and making sure to try and deprive the Russians as much as possible of any kind of usable materials, resources, or efforts that would be able to help them to continue fighting the war. And it is starting to show an impact. Gazprom is entering financial ruin, as we've heard that Gazprom has announced that for the first time in the company's history, they have been taking a loss this year. They are actually losing money operating this year compared to every other year in the company's history where they were managing to make a decent profit. This is showing us once again, considering that Gazprom is really Russia's gas company, that things are going incredibly south inside the Russian Federation, and the economy will most likely be in ruin. Considering that the large part of the Russian economy, nearly 70%, is made up of the oil industry, the oil and gas industry, and that one of the largest gas companies is losing profits this year already, only in May, it is certainly showing us that the Russian Federation's economy is in a massive downward spiral, and that economic recession is only around the corner, and will most likely be affecting the Russian Federation here just within the next few months. Most likely by the time of late winter, we will see that this will all come to a head, and we'll see either the Russian Federation start to go into financial collapse, or in the war to try and stymie the financial collapse that will then result. At the exact same time, we've also been able to hear some larger news from inside of France about French troops possibly entering Ukraine again. President Macron has now decided to change the groundwork that French troops could enter Ukraine, as we heard in the past that if Russian troops threatened the port of Odessa or the city of Kyiv, French troops would enter the country in defense of Ukraine. This has now been changed to him saying that if there is a Russian breakthrough at the front lines, French troops will enter Ukraine on Ukraine's request, meaning that the parameters for French troops enter Ukraine has actually been broadly increased to allow for French troops to really enter if anything goes south in the Ukraine war against Ukraine or the West's favor. This, once again, is only a statement. Of course, the French president has not sent French troops into Ukraine at any point in the past, present, or the future yet, but this is once again showing that the French are getting heavily invested in trying to protect Ukrainian and Western security interests by making sure that they are openly announcing that they will enter the war in Ukraine on Ukraine's side if the war effort starts to go in a bad way for the Ukrainians or for the Western world as a whole. Meanwhile, inside of the United Kingdom, we also got a very interesting statement today by the British Foreign Minister stating that Ukraine has the right to strike Russian territory with British weapons. This may be a major change from prior doctrines in the past, where Western countries have provided the weapons to Ukraine that they possess, but have told Ukraine that they are not allowed to use them to strike on targets inside of the Russian Federation. So far, this means that missiles that have been provided by the British, the French, and the United States, along with the Germans in limited numbers, have always been used on targets within occupied Ukraine, and in cities like Luhansk, Melitopol, Mariupol, Berdyansk, and Sevastopol, among many other cities inside the Crimean Peninsula. This change is starting to show that there is a shift in what is considered to be crossing the red line with the Russian Federation, and now it's being argued, or at least contended for that matter, that direct attacks against the Russian Federation with Western weapons provided to Ukraine may not be crossing any kind of a belligerence threshold that will lead to a larger ground conflict within the area of Europe, or really Eastern Europe as a whole. This is also giving us an idea that apparently they are now starting to get the assumption based off of intelligence, or at least the general lay of the geopolitical and diplomatic field, that the Russians are not that apt to want to do anything against the West. Even if Western weapons were used directly against Russia, Russia most likely heavily lacks any kind of ability to react or respond to that in any meaningful way. And that is most likely why the British foreign minister is now making a 180 change in the statements that the British have been making, and are now saying that British weapons can be used on the Russian Federation, and that they would have absolutely no protest or no reservations against the Ukrainians' usage of the weapon in that way. But nevertheless, that is all of the major breaking news that we have for the moment. I've got to thank all of y'all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure to run this short war news summary for y'all. If y'all did enjoy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and also support us on Patreon. The link is in the description below. And I got to give a massive shout out to all of our patrons who helped to make these videos possible. If it wasn't for folks like them, we wouldn't be able to be here almost every single day trying to cover the major breaking news that has been happening over the course of the war. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.